this was pretty much the gateway to the Attitude Era. Because he was the old school boxer, or old school superstar. You were kind of that new young punk guy, kind of cocky. That was like your swag about it. So this almost foreshadowed going into like pretty much our generation of what we used to watch, because that was still like, I felt that Bret Hart was still like part of he was more of the old school and you were more a new school going into this fight. Would you agree with that or no?
Well, yeah. Certainly Bret comes from a more traditional purist background than I was. And look, part of the idea that got me turned into a good guy was because of my bad guy persona.
Yeah.
Was because of the cockiness and the brashness. Now, when I went to being a good guy and winning the championship, they wanted me to be a different kind of good guy, which obviously history would tell us that wasn't the right move. You know what I mean? That people preferred the Shawn Michaels with attitude and arrogance and brashness and cockiness. But, that was still us trying to get out of that traditional purist style. So in some ways it was a bit of a transition, yes, but from a company standpoint, Vince still felt like the good guys should be a bit more wholesome, as opposed to a good guy with an attitude, which wouldn't come to pass until, a couple years later.
He pioneered it.
Yeah, well, look, I think my bad guy aspects did. I think, trying to put me in that box of being a good guy's good guy was a little difficult, especially at that time in my life, because, that and the real guy were not wholesome, shall we say.
Yeah. It's got to be more fun being the bad guy, though. It's got to be more fun getting booze.
Look, I don't know anybody that doesn't enjoy being a bad guy better than,
I tell you right now,
being a good guy. Yeah. Because it's just so much, you're so much more freedom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I always loved, everyone always asked me, did you love playing at Foxborough, or did you I love playing on the road.
Yeah.
You go play at, New York, and these fans are throwing dildos on the field and shit. Like, that's the kind of shit I used to love, and quiet them down, and I would embrace my inner fucking superstar wrestler mentality. And I literally would put myself in a mindset like I'm a villain. Hell
it's respect. I remember I was doing a show in Buffalo and I mentioned Julian's name and they all started booing, and I was like, that's respect. Yeah. That's because they respect.
Well, no, but plus, and Julian, like it takes you from a performance standpoint, I think, to another level. Julian, look, you guys, everywhere you went, you guys were, after a while, you guys were hated everywhere.
We were like the circus coming into town. Everyone hated it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's because of that success. But that's what, I don't know. Certainly for me, I know that's what almost pushed me to even be better and greater each time. Because again, the more they wanted you to fail, the more you upped your game. And so, yeah, one just feeds the other. And I don't think people understand that the more they do that, the better it makes you and the harder you are to beat.
Proving people wrong is always fun, but let's get into the match. Beginning of the match starts, and everyone says it's kind of slow, but everyone says it started slow. I'm sitting here; these guys are about to wrestle for fucking 60 minutes. Like maybe they're like let's feel each other out. Like how did that beginning? Like was that the plan? Like all right, we're gonna build this thing up. And I heard you guys you designed this 20 minutes before the match. What you guys were gonna kind of.
So we knew we were having the hour, but I know like a week or two before, I know Bret sort of came to me and said like, hey, how about we do this in like, you think of the first 30 and I'll give some thought to the last 30, and then like a day before we'll sort of come together and see where we're at, and of course, we also talked about like, oh my goodness, we're out there for an hour. We can probably do darn near sort of every move under the sun. Think about stuff you haven't done in quite a while. Let's really just think about what we can do to open up sort of the playbook, so to speak. And so that's honestly what we did kind of separately. But then I think a day or two before, we just sort of came together and, you kind of prepare notes or show each other's notes. But again, back then you just can't really. That's the one upside of going an hour is that there is no rush. You know what I mean? You're not having to race against time cues and stuff like that. And you can sort of go out there and get a feel for what it is you want to do and where you're going. So that's honestly what we did. We had a couple sort of what we call signposts in the road, certain places at the match where you want to go like, okay, I feel like this is where we ought to be at about 20. This is where we need to be about 30, and then 45. And then, obviously those last 5, you really want to make sure you nail down and button down. But look, it's just a whole different way of trying to, I guess, have a match. It's just unlike anything you've done before because it's stuff stuff you haven't done before. So you got to go about it differently. But yeah, of course you got to start off. Look, I would argue, and I'll say this, look, what time in history does. People like, starts out slow. And well, that's because now it's going an hour. You know what I mean? You've been told and heard that it starts slow. So, it's exactly now what everything you hear that it is. But I think at the time, when you go in with the unknowns of not knowing how many falls we're going to do, how many falls are coming, because it is a marathon match where, you can add up falls. So clearly it builds slow, and starts slow, but you don't know where it's going. And the thing is, you can't ever recreate the first. You know what I mean? And again, very well, a play that, again, dazzled them, again, in 1997, or 2003, seeing it on a number of highlight reels and then, calling it again, in 2022, it's not quite the same. You know what I mean? But the first time it was very different. It was innovative and it worked. And look, that's one of the mindsets you have to go into watching this match. And I don't think a lot of people have the ability to do that now, so many years, distant from it.
This was like the first time I remember where like 15 minutes were fought outside the ring. And I would say the momentum, and when I was like, oh my God, what the fuck, is when you kicked the timekeeper.
Tony Chimmel?
Yeah. Now, was that in the process of like, all right, I'm going to kick this dude right in the face, you move your head, or what? Or did that just happen? Because it didn't look, that dude took that boot to the face. I'm telling you, wasn't he stretchered out?
Yes. Yeah, he was. And it was, pretty good in there. But very, very honored to say I didn't injure anybody. But no, that was something.
No,
that,
you did.
Again,
he was stretchered off. Okay, he was fucking stretchered off.
Yes. Well, difference between hurt. Didn't say I didn't hurt him.
Hurt and injured.
Didn't injure him. Yes, exactly.
Football guys
Big
know
difference.
that too. Coach would look at you. Hey, you hurt or you injured? Coach, I'm hurt. All right, we'll see you. Yeah. Get back in.
Right. Hurt, you can survive and get back in there. You keep going. That's exactly right.
Was there a point oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that was something that somebody had suggested that we thought was freaking fantastic. Yeah. But no, that is not anything. Again, this was a time in our business. You didn't go over stuff. You were a pro.
Yeah.
You don't get out there. You don't practice. This is one of those things that you go like, okay, this is what's going to happen. All right. And you go out there and you make it happen. And you trust that everybody's going to be there and do what they have to do. And of course, being out there with a guy like Bret, that was absolutely no problem. I knew he was going to get out of the way. It's just, it was just a matter of, how hard I end up kicking Tony.
I mean, you talk about Bret just making the right decisions and like you improvise so much with Bret because you can. I mean, there's so much that can happen there. But you've been in some epic matches going up to this. I mean, the ladder match, Razor Ramon, like, was there something about Bret in the ring where you're like, oh shit, this is like, this? Was there a point in this match where you're like, this is special?
Well, because he was always technically like one of the best.
Yeah.
Like you could always tell, like if you watch your guys' match, like you could always tell as, these guys are executing their fucking shit right. And everything looks extremely like it's very painful. It hurts. I mean, everything was smooth. The transition from each guy, like the athleticism wise, the wrestling, it was insane. Like,
so look, because he is unbelievably precise in all of that. And I will say, being in there with a guy like him makes you better. You know what I mean? In that kind of stuff, where again, I feel like I had all the flash, the dazzle. I think I was good wrestling, but I've always said, if we're talking about, I know I got asked on an interview once, like, who's a better wrestler, you or Bret Hart? And I for the first time it dawned on me, like, oh, better wrestler, Bret. For sure. Bret, better performer, showman, performer, me. But there's a difference. But Bret was so precise and so good in everything he did that I felt like it made me better and more attentive to all of those things, to the transitions, to the working of the holds. And that's one of the things that I always enjoyed about him, because he just always made people better. To answer your question is yes, you feel pressure because look, nobody has a bad match with Bret Hart. Thankfully, at that time, nobody was having bad matches with me. So between the two of us, we understood, the pressure and the bar at which the two of us had set, and that's where it all comes down to. You have to deliver on that bar, and that's a pressure and a burden both of you are carrying in that match. But obviously, you rise to that, and that's what makes you better.